Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today, I will be reviewing the anime series Vinland Saga, and at the time that I'm recording this, there are currently only 2 seasons with 24 episodes each, meaning there's only 48 episodes in total. I do believe there are more seasons still to be released, but I'm not 100% sure on that. To start off this review, I'm going to give a little short summary just of Vinland Saga that doesn't really contain any spoilers, just for those who might not have seen it yet. If they're just looking for a review that's worth watching. So Vinland Saga takes place in the era of Vikings and follows the story of Thorfinn, a young boy from Iceland. Thorfinn's father, Thors, was a well-known and widely feared Viking. However, he gave up the life of a Viking and moved to Iceland in order to focus on creating a family and giving them a good life. However, tragedy strikes when Thors is killed by a man named Askeladd in front of Thorfinn's eyes. We then watch as Thorfinn makes it his life goal to avenge his father and kill Askeladd. Throughout the story, we see a lot of character development from Thorfinn, especially in the second season. I'd highly recommend this anime to anyone who has an interest in Vikings or just loves a great story. There's plenty of action and many well-written characters to make the show an entertaining watch. Moving on, the rest of the video will definitely contain some spoilers. I'll try and keep them to a minimum, but they're bound to come up when I'm discussing the show. If you don't want to see them, but you still want to see my final rating, just skip to the timestamp on screen to see the rating and avoid the spoilers. In Season 1, we meet some important characters like Thorfinn, Thors, Leif, Askeladd, Thorkel, and Canute. One of the best things in Season 1 of Vinland Saga is that it shows off the excellently written characters beautifully. The dynamics between some of these characters, such as Thorfinn and Askeladd, are amazing, considering the fact that we see Thorfinn trying to seek revenge for his father against Askeladd, and yet Askeladd is almost acting like a father figure to him, in a way. It's a very interesting thing to watch and creates a unique experience that's much different from any other traditional revenge story. As time goes on, we see Thorfinn develop into a brutal killer, and along the way, as he's traveling with Askeladd's crew, we meet several other characters like Thorkel and Canute. Thorkel's a great character. He's just kind of a big brute Viking who dominates on the battlefield. We also learn later that he's related to Thorfinn. I believe he's his uncle, technically. As for Canute, he's another character similar to Thorfinn who undergoes an insane amount of character development, and I'd say is generally one of the better written characters in the series as well. With that being said, I think a majority of the characters, if not really like all of them, are pretty well written, but Thorfinn and Canute are definitely two of the characters that undergo probably the most development in the entire series. And that's what Vinland Saga excels at. It's the character creation that's by far the best aspect in my opinion. You definitely have a lot of depth in all of the characters and definitely have like the most development for some characters that I've ever seen in any show I've watched so far. Albeit it's not that many, but I've watched quite a few, and Vinland Saga definitely has some of the most development I've seen of any of the shows. Another great thing about Vinland Saga is the animation during the fights and whatnot. They are beautifully executed, and I think they represent the brutality of Vikings very well. You see lots of limbs and stuff get cut off, and also you get to see the view of raids on villages where both the kind of terror of the villagers that are being raided and just the ruthlessness of the Vikings. I think it represents very well in the animation, and that's just another bonus of Season 1 for this show that I think makes it such a great series in general. Now, with all the great things I just mentioned, there are a couple minor criticisms I do have about the first season. The first one was definitely kind of like the very odd language barrier thing they had going on. Everything is spoken in Japanese. I watched in sub, so everyone was speaking Japanese, yet throughout the story at many points they're like supposed to be communicating in like either English, Nordic, French, and just multiple different languages, and there's many times where it's like they're supposed to be confused, trying to speak to each other, but as the watcher of the show, you're hearing them all speak in the same language, so it just can be a little confusing, kind of trying to figure out who is not correctly understanding what someone is saying. Again, it's just something minor. I understand why, because you don't want to like actively change the language that's being said throughout the show. That would be a little bit more probably confusing to the viewer as well, but it's just a little off-putting, I would say, but nothing too major. Moving on to the next point, on episode 8, we are introduced to a couple characters named Gorm and Hordaland. They kind of set up these characters in a way that makes it seem like they're going to be important to the story at some point, but after season 8, they're just completely irrelevant. Again, it's not really anything huge. It just felt like wasted potential and just seemed a little odd that they, took their time to kind of, show off these characters just for them to not be, important to the story at all. And the only other criticism I had about the first season was I just felt it kind of went on, like it dragged a little too long. I believe the beginning of the first season was really good, and then the end of the first season was also really good, but they probably could have cut out a little bit of like the middle section. Again, it's kind of just minor criticism, but it's just criticism to be had, I guess. Either way, I still think the first season was great, but that would be the criticisms I have for it.
Today's subject, slavery.
Transitioning into season 2, we meet several more important characters such as Snake and his crew, Einar, Arnheid, and Ketil plus his family. Starting off in season 2, we already have heavy character development from Thorfinn. Several years after the events of the first season, we now meet Thorfinn again. However, this time he's a slave, and he's kind of the polar opposite of what he was in season 1, because, in season 1 he was a ruthless killer who was only focused on revenge, and then we get to season 2 and he's kind of like a shell of his former self. He's very empty, he's much more calm, definitely, he's like a chill guy. He doesn't really care for anything. He just kind of lives his life as a slave working on this farm. And then we're introduced to Einar, who's another character, and he ends up becoming friends with Thorfinn as they work together on the farm. Another character we're introduced to that is also a slave is Arnheid, and she's a female slave who works directly for the master, and we later learn he has a very strong liking for Arnheid. Without just fully re-explaining the second season, we kind of just follow Thorfinn as he finds his purpose in life after the death of Askeladd, since he no longer has anyone to kill to avenge his father. The character development in this season is really the main focus. We don't see fighting all that much in the second season. It's very minimal, and it is very much just focused on the development of Thorfinn as a character. And also Canute, we do see quite a bit of development from Canute in the second season as well. And towards the end of the first season, we also did see some more development there, but he has become also much more of a different person in the second season, very similarly to Thorfinn, because at the end of the first season, Canute kind of decided, he wanted to bring peace to the lands, and he also wanted to avoid getting into unnecessary wars. But what we notice in the second season is that Canute has kind of changed a little bit. It seems he's almost being altered by his new spot as kind of like the king, and he is now, fighting wars and killing innocent people for no reason, which is what he completely wanted to avoid in the first season. Although at the very end of the second season, we do see Thorfinn kind of talk him out of his ways as king, and he ends up becoming more like he was at the end of the first season, which is just, again, more development throughout the second season. Again, I don't want to say too much to spoil the entirety of the second season, but for the most part, a lot of it is just developing characters, and there isn't as much action as there was in the first season. Unfortunately, the fact that the second season doesn't really have much action, like fights and whatnot, I have seen a lot of people kind of claim that it's boring and it's just not as good as the first season, and that it just kind of sucks, because personally I fully disagree with that. I think the second season is honestly much better than the first season. It's just a shame that the reputation that Vinland Saga has got a bit tarnished in some people's eyes because of the second season, when in reality I feel the second season is better than the first, and a lot of people just don't like that because they preferred seeing the action of the first season, which, there's nothing wrong with liking the action. I mean, the fights were amazing in the first season, but I don't think it's really fair to say that the second season is not good or that it's boring. It's just, it's more story focused rather than fighting focused, and I think that's a bit of a downfall for it. Even though I personally think it's better, I think they kind of lost maybe some fans just because it didn't have the same kind of effect that the first season had. In fact, the second season is very, very different from the first season. They are almost complete flips. Like, the first season's a bit more fast-paced and, like, you know, fights and whatnot, like I mentioned before, but the second season slows it down and is much more focused on character development, and you learn a lot more about the characters. I personally think Vinland Saga as a whole is a fantastic show that excels in storytelling and character development. To wrap up the review, I'll give my rating for Season 1 and for Season 2, and then for the show as a whole. I'd give Season 1 Vinland Saga a solid 8 out of 10 because I think there was room for improvement, but it was still a great season. Season 2 for me is definitely a 9.5 out of 10. I think that season was nearly perfect. I loved every aspect of it and seeing how Thorfinn changed as a character. Overall, based on the 2 seasons I've seen, I'd give Vinland Saga a 9 out of 10. I'm excited to see what Season 3 delivers, assuming we get one in the near future. Thank you for watching my review of Vinland Saga. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and comment your thoughts down below. I plan on doing several more reviews for shows that I've watched, such as Naruto, Attack on Titan, and Cowboy Bebop. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.